Okay, the mystery that prophets looked into was, how is this event that we're talking about, Hayden, turn me down quite a bit. How is this event that we're talking about going to ultimately be fulfilled in the Messiah in the kingdom? Okay? Because remember, when you're reading a place like 2 Samuel chapter 7, and we talked about this a lot the last couple weeks, 2 Samuel 7 is David wanting to build a house for God. God says, no, I'm going to build you a house, and your son will build the temple and will build the kingdom, and on his throne it will remain forever. That has to be talking about Solomon first. But it cannot be talking about Solomon alone. Because if Solomon does not fulfill that scripture to the point where the word forever and kingdom that cannot be destroyed and kingdom cannot, he doesn't fulfill that. There's a lineage after, right, that will fulfill that. So, angels themselves looked into these and did not fully understand. When Isaiah said these things, they were trying to put all the pieces together and figure it out too. It was a mystery. It was not revealed until who came? Jesus. So, and I tell this story. Edwin used to tell this story, but Greg Wannerman, a mutual friend of ours, good friend of mine, was a Jew, right? And he walked into Edwin's office, and was like, you Christians, you do, you take the Old Testament and you don't know how to use it, you don't use it right, your fulfillment, right, blah, 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 blah. What did Edwin say? You're right. Most Christians do. Let's sit down and talk about how it should be interpreted. And when he explained to him dual fulfillment prophecy, light bulb for the Jew. Became a Christian naturally. Okay? I mean, you start talking about the temple, right? The temple started off in the garden, to the tabernacle, right? To the temple, to Jesus, to the church, and ultimately to heaven itself, right, will be a temple. You start following the garden pattern. You start following the tree of life pattern. There's all these things, right, when Jesus will say, this is fulfilled in your hearing. What he's talking about is, I am the greatest expression of whatever we're talking about. There's no greater expression of salvation than what I brought. Have there been other people who brought salvation? Yeah. Every judge brought salvation. Kings brought salvation. Prophets brought salvation. But nobody did it like Jesus. Okay? So that's just a quick, any questions on that? I mean, I know I harp on that a lot, but it's, trying to find commentaries. I'm reading Isaiah 7. I'm in the Pulpit commentary, Truth for Today commentary, Gospel Advocate commentaries, looking at, and it's just like, yep, this has to be talking about Jesus. It's, there's really no significance for anything going on in the I'm like, what? Right? What good does this do for Ahaz in the historical, right, events that are going on? So, we want to look at Matthew's use of prophecy. As I was saying, Matthew 1:23, which is the fulfillment of the virgin birth, that was not one of those prophecies that Jews were like, oh, the Messiah would be born of a virgin. That would have been blasphemous, right? How does that happen? That would be impossible, especially the fact that Mary was conceived by whom? God, right? They weren't looking for that. They weren't anticipating that. So this is one of those ones that threw them off a little bit. So let's go to Matthew for a moment. There's different ways Matthew uses prophecy, okay? And he will be kind of our case study for really what Scripture does as well. There are direct prophecies, okay? Like Matthew 1, 22 and 23. So I'm going to read that. Matthew 1, 22 and 23. Let me get you mics. Who wants to read it? Raise your hand. Done? Sure. Here, Rick, I'll put this over here.
She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us.
Okay. 1. What is Jesus' name? It's not Emmanuel. Jesus' name, well, Yeshua, right? They did not name him Emmanuel. Connect that for me. If this is solely speaking of Jesus, why is Jesus given any other name but Emmanuel? Now, back in Isaiah 7, you can bet your bottom dollar, is what my mom used to say, right? That child, actual name was named what? Emmanuel. So we are taking a story that the Jews would have known well and saying, look, Jesus is the fulfillment of the naming of God with us. He doesn't need to name God with us because he is God with us. You see that? And so Matthew's looking at it going, look at this connection. During this time in Ahaz's life, he was waiting, when will the enemies be defeated? And that's what the Jews were waiting in the days of Rome, right? Weren't they? That's what they were waiting for the Messiah. When will our enemies be defeated? When will we be at peace again and at rest? When the Emmanuel comes. He doesn't have to be named it, but he is the fulfillment of it. Someone else read Matthew 2, 5, and 6.
They told him in Bethlehem of Judea, for so is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means less least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.
Now, this is one of those direct line prophecies, okay? Meaning Micah, a lot of your minor prophets are directly looking towards, because they're after the time of the exile, they're after the coming back of the Babylonian captivity. A lot of what they're seeing, like with Malachi, hey, we're not going to hear a word from the Lord anymore. We're not going to have another judge come. We're not going to have another, one of these prophets come. They are looking directly to the day when the Messiah would come. So this is one of those, especially post-exile, you're going to be looking for, there's going to be a lot more direct, and Jews would agree with that. Jews would understand that the Messiah was going to be born where? In Bethlehem. This wasn't speaking of another person. There wasn't another person who fulfilled this even in a small way. Okay, so it can be both. There's the other balance. Not everything is a dual fulfillment prophecy. Not everything has all of these small, some of them are just, only Jesus can fulfill that. You go back to Deuteronomy, and Moses is anticipating a prophet. There would be no other prophet like the one Moses. There's only one other prophet who's like Moses, and it's who? It's Jesus, right? And even Jews would have understood that prophecy to be messianic. Okay? We won't read all of these, but I do want to read 2:15. Someone read Matthew 2:15.
2:15, and was there until death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt have I called my son.
Now, I want to follow this because let's go back. He's quoting Hosea 11:1. All right? So let's go and read Hosea chapter 11 and verse 1. And if you were reading this passage before ever reading Matthew, would you have ever come up with the fact that this is messianic? Someone read it. Hosea 11:1 and verse 2. Would you consider this to be a messianic prophecy? Out of Egypt I called my son, and when I called them I loved them, but the more they were called, the more they sinned. How in the world is Matthew going to quote Hosea 11:1 and use it as a messianic prophecy when he's speaking about the sins of Israel being brought out of Egypt? Which is one of these things we have to kind of get in our minds. Same thing with the book of Revelation. They will take pieces and bits of things that you can understand from the Old Testament. And Revelation will use those symbols with an understanding that you have, but use them differently and shape their own new meaning. Okay? Jesus, all Matthew is saying is that he's using Hosea 11:1, out of Egypt I called my son. But hold on to that, because using Hosea 11:1 just seems off. But we're going to look when we get over here. Sometimes Matthew's building an argument, okay? And it's kind of like a sermon. A lot of times you'll take verses, right, and you'll piece them together to see a grand narrative. Now, well, we'll get there in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. Also, someone read 17 and 18, and then we'll get over here of Matthew.
Matthew 2,
Yep.
17 and 18. All right.
Well, read 16 through 8. Just read 16, 17, 18.
Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old and under, according to the time that had been ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more.
So, when we're quoting Jeremiah 31 is talking about Rebecca, or Rachel, who's weeping for her children. What story is Jeremiah 31 talking about? The Exodus. What happens? Why does Moses how does that whole story begin? The drowning of children 2 and under. Same thing's happening. Okay, every male child. Moses gets put in a basket to avoid it. Goes to Pharaoh's home. Now, why would they use the word Rachel? It's the mother of Israel, right? Right? Which Israel is a representative of the entire nation. So what is Matthew doing? So these are direct. He quoting directly, these must be fulfilled. Indirectly, let's look at Matthew's argument from chapter 1 to chapter 7. Right? And we could keep going through the book of Matthew. Chapter 1, he wants to bring up the lineage. Starts with Abraham. Why does he not go back to Adam? Well, he's worried about the Jewishness being of the child of Abraham. Why is Abraham so significant in the lineage of Christ? Father of the Jewish nation. The promise was made to Abraham through your seed. Wait a minute. Your seed? Who is Abraham's seed that was the promised child? Isaac. So how can it be Jesus? Right? This is one of those multiple fulfillments. Now, this would be one of those multiple because God continues to renew the covenant. I am the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he renews that through each lineage to the point where it's going to be pushed no longer to Abraham's lineage, but to David's lineage. And by the way, the genealogy specifically has 3 different sections, and it will end that way. From Abraham to David, David to the exile. What's so important about the exile when it comes to the Messiah? What's so important about the exile when it comes to the Messiah? First of all, what does exile represent? Well, hold on to that.
Are you referring to when they're kind of exiled out of their own land, taken by the country?
Okay, exile, this is Babylonian exile, sorry. This is Babylonian exile. There's multiple exiles. I'm like, you've already read this, right? You know the genealogy, right? We're leading to the Babylonian exile, and it cuts off there. It doesn't give us any more lineage after the exile. There's several generations, if you go follow Luke's, from the exile to Jesus. Matthew skips that. Why? Yeah. And there's 14. What? Yeah, okay. So when they go to the exile, all the prophets pre-exile, their prophecy is when you come back from exile, that's when all of the messianic fulfillment, right, would be fulfilled. Well, go read your Old Testament. When they come back from the exile, what doesn't happen? They start off, it's going well. Israel, right? Israel is not the son of God that they're supposed to be. And so the minor prophets and your latter prophets look forward to a time later when it would happen. Okay? And so Jesus is the fulfillment of the exile. He's the Messiah. He's the one who will begin this kingdom. He will be king, and we'll look at that. And then he quotes Isaiah 7:14 right after that. Isaiah is prophesying about what? And telling us about what would happen after. Matthew uses this indirectly to tell the story of Jesus through the genealogy of Jesus in chapter 1. And then chapter 2, he's leading us to Egypt and into the Exodus, that Jesus is going through the same story as who? He's going through the Israelite story. Chapter 3 leads us into the baptism, which out of the Exodus, where do they go? They go through the water directly where? Where does chapter 4 take us? Right after the baptism, where does he go? Into the wilderness. And it's interesting, when Satan is tempting Jesus in the wilderness, what book does he quote from? He quotes from Deuteronomy, 3 different places, right? Exodus and Deuteronomy, both places, because it's in Exodus, but retold in Deuteronomy. He quotes 3 different places where Moses accuses of Israel of failing in the wilderness, failing some kind of test. Jesus passes all of the tests, okay, by using the same scriptures that Moses, and then right from there, he gathers his disciples, and he goes up on a mountain, and he begins to give the second telling of the law. The Sermon on the Mount is Leviticus 19, Deuteronomy. It's the retelling of the law. Indirectly, Matthew is leading us through dual fulfillment prophecy, but through theme and through types and shadows, and rather than just, hey, look at this one singular verse, boom. This one singular verse, boom. But you see how he's retelling the story of Israel in Jesus' life? Why is that so important? Because Jesus is an Israelite. Israel was supposed to be what? A kingdom of priests, right? They were supposed to be the light unto the nations. They were supposed to be what people saw and say, I want to be a part of that nation. They failed. Jesus came to be the Son of God, who was called up out of Egypt, who was born from Judah, who was born of the lineage of David, who fulfills the Abrahamic promises. Do you see that? That's how prophecy is used. And so we need to be looking, where is Jesus fit? But the first thing you need to know is, what is the actual story? What is actually going on? What is not going on? And then see, how does Jesus fulfill this? How is Jesus a representative of this? Not, well, this has nothing to do with, right? And we just point right to Jesus. You can make Joshua a character of Jesus, right? You can make all these people a character of Jesus rightfully if you first figure out what was going on right then and there. Any questions on that? I want to imprint this into our head, because unfortunately, I hear a lot of people use Old Testament scriptures and they immediately jump to Jesus. Like, there's so much you're missing if you do that first. Okay? All right, so let's actually get into Isaiah 7 and 8. So let's go back. Yes?
Is this also maybe a reflection of the apostles? Because always, when I read through the Gospels, and Jesus was very specific when he told them, they're going to come kill me, and I'm going to be raised. And he told them plainly several times, and it seemed to always go over their head. And then he explained to him, well, when the Comforter's here, maybe he'll explain all these things to you, and you'll understand after I'm raised. Is that kind of the same kind of thing where he's giving them something that's going to happen right then and there, but they don't really understand, and it blows right past them?
Okay. I love you. John 14. Okay, when Jesus is preparing his disciples to go. I am going to prepare a place for you. The moment we think of a place prepared for Christians, where do we first jump? Heaven. John 14 is not talking about heaven. Now, the King James Version kind of did us a little disservice because it used the word mansion, right? So mansions in heaven, right? They've got to go together, right? They don't. He says, I am preparing a tabernacle, a dwelling, it's actually the Hebrew word betav, a family. It's a patriarchal system that goes all the way back to Tamar and Judah. The reason why Judah considered Tamar to be more righteous than him is because he did not fulfill his responsibility as the patriarch of his betav, his dwelling, his family. That's what it's talking about. Okay? She was married to his son. He died. He should have given her the next son. And he kept messing around with her, and finally she takes matters in her own hand, because in that society, if he doesn't take care of her, she's done. What she did was sinful, right? Not okay. But when Judah actually realizes the place he put her in, no way. He says, she is more righteous than me. That's the betav. I am going to prepare a betav. I'm going away. But don't worry, I'm coming back again. Oh, second coming. No. He's going away for 3 days, and he's coming back again. Is there another fulfillment in that when Jesus leaves again toward the second coming? Absolutely. Is he preparing a better dwelling? But the first dwelling that he's talking about is the kingdom of God here on this earth, what we call the church. I'm preparing a place for you to be, right? Now, heaven, and whatever you think that is a greater fulfillment of that, but he's specifically speaking to the apostles. I'm leaving, it's going to throw you guys off. You're going to be upset. And they all were. And when he comes back is when it motivates them and kicks them in the butt to really become true disciples. Thank you for bringing it. I don't know who brought that up now. But thank you for bringing that up. All right, Isaiah 7, quickly. Assyria and Israel. Now, when you're reading in Isaiah 7, it says Ephraim, but Ephraim is of the tribe of Israel. Israel represents the 10 tribes. They are coming together against Judah. Ahaz sees this, and he's worried. God sends Isaiah and say, hey, Ahaz, don't worry. Trust in me. Ahaz won't. Okay, I'm going to send you a sign. I'm going to send you a sign. Ask of me a sign. Ahaz won't do it. By the way, the reason why, most likely why Ahaz won't ask for a sign is because Ahaz, if he gets a sign, he has to trust. Ahaz currently, he's been trusting in his allies, Egypt. Ain't going to work out for him in the end, Israel. Trust in me. Okay, you don't want a sign? I'm going to give you a sign anyway. Here's a young virgin. When she gives birth, and he becomes about the age of 12, this is when you know God is with you. God's not with you for the first 12 years, even though his name's Emmanuel. When he hits, it's about the age of 12, and this happens, then you will know God is with you. Okay? Chapter 8, we'll get there in a moment. Then he sends judgment on Assyria. He's going to shave off their beard, which is, it's a disgrace. Remember when David sends his envoy of people to a king and he shaves half their beard? It's a shame. Okay, I'm going to shave their beard. I'm going to split them up. They'll never be... He's basically prophesying when Israel will be destroyed by Assyria. Interestingly enough, their teammate is going to be the one who destroys them and also incorporate them into other, right, bring in all these other nations and intermingle them. This is how you get Samaritans, by the way. This is how you get Samaria. Okay? The half-breeds. Isaiah 8 is another sign. He gives a judgment on Assyria, There's another sign of birth, but whose child is this? This is Isaiah's son, who will be named Malepheshashalamana. That's really close. It's really close. Maher Shalahazbaz, which means the spoil speeds and the prey hastens, which means Assyria's going to come, but they're going to what? They're going to be broken and they're going to flee. When that child is about 2, when he can say mama. This is many years later. Remember what I told you? That these are a collection of sermons? Isaiah 7, this is probably about 10 years in between Isaiah 7 and 8. Because Ahaz is starting to wonder, hey, when will you do what you said back here? I'm going to give you another sign. There's going to be another child. Here's what you'll name him, because God likes to name people according to what's going on in the world. It's, we're glad we don't do that, right? You imagine COVID babies, what they'd be named? Whew. Hey, little 19s running around. Sorry. Name the child, and then he gives the future for Judah. But what he does here is he expands. Here's a baby, COVID. He expands the idea of the Emmanuel. He's going to expand it, and then we're going to get into chapter 9, and he's going to look forward to a future baby that will be even greater than the Assyria defeat, and he will be a child who is born, wonderful counselor, Prince of Peace, right? So Isaiah is actually giving us the multiple fulfillment, all right? But a lot of times we just connect Isaiah 7 and 8 and go, well, that must be Jesus, because in chapter 8 it says this about the Emmanuel. Chapter 9 it says this about the Emmanuel. So no, Matthew's doing the same thing. He's taking us from one place to the next. All right, we will read through Isaiah 7 and 8 next week, or at end of 7 and 8, and get into 9. Thank you.